Hey guys, welcome to this lecture on variable and the types. In this lecture, we'll see how variables can be created with Python and how their types are defined dynamically. What I really mean dynamically is you don't have to give the type of the variables while defining it in the Python. Think of a variable as a name that is attached to the particular object. In Python, basically variables need not to be declared or defined in advance as we have in the case of other programming language, that is Java. So in order to create the variables, you have to just give this assignment operator with the value and you can just start using it. And assignment is done basically, I've already showed, with this single equal sign. So in order to just create the variable in Python, you have to first give the name of a variable and just assign to this value that is 10 to the n. So if I just say that is the value of n, then you could see 10 over here. So you can just print with this print statement that is the value of this n, and you could get the same, that is 10 over here. So this assignment, which is n equal 10, is read or interpreted as n is assigned the value of 10. Once this is done, n can be used with the statement or expression. So when I just say n plus 1, then that means you are using this variable for another operation, which is the addition with this 1. Then you could do any operations with this variable. So that means you have a reusability here. So if I just say n equal 10 or n multiplied by 10, that means you are using the same variable for another operation. So you could see the means of a reusability by using this variable. So if I just say you that is make me a variable that is containing the 300, then you could do simply by just creating the name, that is n and 300. So you could see in this n equal 300, which was basically this same variable n which was assigning this 10, now it contains n is 300. So the new value will be substituted with this n in the new context. So that is basically a dynamic. So you can also give this floating number or basically a decimal to this n, and it is basically containing or substituted with the new variable or with this new value over here, which is 300, which was 300, only a 300 which was integer before, and now with the new assignment you have a floating value assigned to this same n. So it is basically a dynamic type. So let me make a one variable which is basically integer. So let me just create this variable with this value 7, and when I just print this my integer, then you could see we have an integer here. So Python supports two type of number. One is integer, another is floating point number. So in order to define the floating number, you don't need to do anything, you just have to give any decimal number. So let me just create my float variable in order to contain or define this value, which is 7.0, and we have this decimal, that means this is a float. In order to check if it is or not, then what you can do simply is use this type method. So in this type method, what you can do is we'll just pass my float over here, which is variable, to see the type of this my float. Then you could see it is of class float, and if I just type or put this type method and just pass argument is a my int, which is this integer variable, then you could see class is integer over here. So basically we have this type method in order to check for the type, and we can also just convert this integer to the float and vice versa using this typecasting method technique. So in order to just convert, let me just make my float, that is our variable, and in this I'll just make use of this float method in order to convert my integer, which is my int, into the float. So let me just hit enter here, then you could see my float now contains this 7.0, and let me make my integer 1. So let me say my integer 1, which is basically our integer, and basically I want to convert this my float, which was our floating value or the decimal, into the integer. So let me just print this my integer 1, then you could see which this my float value, which was basically our 7.0, has been typecasted or converted into this integer value of 7 over here. And we have next variable, which is a string. So anything which is text from your name to the country where you live in is string in the Python. So let's create the one string for now. So let me say my string, which is our string, and let me just create this string with hello. So we have created this my string. So let me just print this down. Then you could see my string is hello. So you can create the same string with the help of single quote. So we can make use of this single quote and make sure you close with this same single quote over here. And if I just print this down, then you could see the same string which was created with this double quote. So that means you can just create your string with single quote, double quote, and with this any number of quote basically. So you could wonder why we have this different quote in order to create the string. So advantage here lies when you use something that is apostrophe in your string. So let me take example here. So let me make a my string, which is our string, and in this case I want to make use of this apostrophe, and let me say worry about me. And if I just create this string, and if I just print this string, then you could see we have the single apostrophe and basically the double quote in the case of a same string. But what if I want to just make this string which is same string, but in the case we just use something that is a single quote, and then I'll just say the same sentence containing the apostrophe and worry. So when I just hit enter, then you could see invalid syntax is this done is only the string over here. That means anything that is open over here and close is only the single quote, and basically Python doesn't care about this t and worry. So basically it is not inside this single quote. That means you have here invalid syntax. So make sure you have to just make multiple this quote in order to make your string valid in order to work with that. So make sure you use multiple quote if you have something that is a single quote or double quote inside your sentence. And basically we'll make use of this that is multiple quote in the upcoming lecture, where we'll just remove the punctuation using the Python code. So next what we'll see is a different operation that can be performed with this number and string using the numerous operator. So I'll make that one variable which will contain the 1, and let me make the 2 variable which will contain 2, and let me just say 3, that is the combination of 1 and 2. So if you wonder here, we have this 1 and 2 variable created over here which contains 1 and 2 respectively. So we can make use of this arithmetic operator in order to add this 1 and 2. So when I just say 3, let me just print 3, then that means 3 is the addition of 1 and 2. That means you can do multiple numerous operations, which is mathematical operations, with the case of variables. And you can also work similar with the case of the string. So let me make a string which says hello, and let me make another string which says world. So we have hello world over here. So in order to just concatenate this hello world, so let me just make hello world variable which will just concatenate our hello, and let me just say world, and let me just concatenate with this space and world. So basically you can make use of this string variable in order to just concatenate these two strings. So you could see here hello world. So you can make use of this plus operator in order to add your string, in order to add your number. Furthermore, assignment can be done on more than one variable simultaneously on the same line code. So let me take an example. What if I want to just assign this a and b value, which is our variable, and let me just assign some value to this variable in the single line code. So you can do this with just this comma operator between these two variable, and let me just put here that is 3 and a 4. And if I just print now what is the value of a and b, and you could see we have 3 and 4, which is the 3 is stored in this a and 4 is stored in this b. Mixing operators between number and string is not supported in Python, so just remember that. So let me take an example here. So first of all, let me just make one variable, and let me just make two variable. So if you want to just mix the operator between this number and the string, it is basically not valid in the case of Python. So let me just make another that is a string. So let me just combine this string and the number in this same line. So let me just say print me. So let me just say combine me 1, which is basically this number, and the combine me 2, and let me just combine another that is string, which is hello. So if you just try to just combine your number in a string, it is going to throw us an error that is unsupported operand type for integer and a string at the same time. So it is not valid in the case of a Python. Just remember that. Furthermore, Python also supports the chain assignment, which make it possible to assign the same value to the several variables simultaneously. So what I really mean is, let me just make a variable A and variable B and variable C, and let me just assign this 300 value to this all variable. So when I just try to print this A, B, C, which is the variable that we just assigned, then you could see 300, 300 and 300. So that means we have a chained assignment here. So in this chain assignment, which shows the 300 is assigned to this variable A, B and C simultaneously. If you wonder what is actually happening when you make a variable assignment, this is an important question in Python because the answer differs somewhat from what you would find in many other programming languages. Python is a highly object-oriented language. In fact, virtually every item of data in a Python program is an object of its specific type or a class. So if I just say print me, that is the code which is 300, let me just hit enter, and when you are presented with this print statement with the 300, the interpreter does something like it will create first a integer. That means you have just passed an integer here. That means it will just create an integer object and it will just give it value 300 and it will just display 300 over here. That means you are only using this object and class in the case of Python. And if you want to see if it is of an integer class or not, we can make use of the same type that was defined over here. So you can make use of the same type and just pass here 300, then you could see it is of integer class. That means the Python will first create an integer object and it will just give the value which is 300 and it will display it to the console. So furthermore, if I just create another variable which is yum and let me say yen, then let me just give the id method and the variable would be yum over here. Then you could see we have an id this, and if I just print the id which is in the case of yen, so let me see the id of yen, then you could see another id. With this statement which is yum equal 300, that means the Python creates an integer object with the value 300 and sets yum as a reference to it. And in the case of yen, the similarly assigned to the integer object with the value of 300 but not the same object. Thus they have a different identities which you can verify with this return value. That means they are actually different, they are not the same, they are basically referred to different integer object. So everything in the Python is an object oriented. So from just defining variable to just making a decorators to just making your own custom exception, all is about the class and object in the case of the Python. Just remember that. And you could see completely over here the id for yum and yen is completely different. Now let's talk about the reserved word or keyword that is provided by the Python. There is one more restriction on the identifier name. The Python language reserves the small set of keyword like you see over here. These are the keyword that is designated special language functionality. That means you can't make a variable with this name. So no object can have the same name as the reserved word over here. So that means no object can have the same name as a reserved word. So if I just make use of any of these keyword, like let me make a variable with this break, then you could see error over here. So let's get back to our code and see if we just can create the variable name with this break statement. And we are back to the console, and in this console let me just make a break and let me just assign 40 to it. Then you could see invalid syntax over here, which means you can just create this variable with anything that is a keyword, and you can just see this list anytime just by typing help, and you can just put here help and you should pass that is keywords. And if you just pass keywords over here and let me just print this down, you could see here is our Python keyword list, and you can just make use of it. And basically this reserved word are case sensitive and must be used exactly as shown over here, which means this false is not same as the false. and you can make the false variable like this which can contain value, but you can't just make this false which can contain this value because it is just saying can't assign to the keyboard. So you can just play around with this keyword, they are really important, and just remember that you can't use this bunch of keywords in order to make your Python variable. So this will be the wrap for this lecture. See you in the next one.